Rose was 89 years old when she made the call that would forever change the lives of 12 people. It was a rainy, winter Tuesday in Melbourne, and her trembling voice echoed through the phone to her eldest daughter, Margaret. "Maggie, darling, I need you to come to the hospital and bring everyone, all my grandchildren. It's urgent." A shiver traced its way down Margaret's spine. For the past 3 decades, Rose had always been a reserved woman, almost shy when it came to asking anything of the family. She was known to all as the poor Nan, the one who always turned up to family gatherings in the same faded blue dress, who never had money for fancy Christmas presents, who lived in a modest little house in the Sydney suburbs. "Mum, what happened? Are you all right?" Margaret asked, already reaching for her car keys. "I'm fine, dear. But there's something I need to tell you all. Something I've held on to for a very long time. Too long." Rose's voice was laden with an emotion Margaret had never heard before. Over the next 2 hours, Margaret made a flurry of frantic calls. She rang her 2 brothers, David and Patrick, who immediately cancelled their work appointments. She called the 12 grandchildren scattered across Australia, some in Sydney, others in Melbourne, Brisbane, and even Perth. "Nan Rose is in hospital and wants to see us all." Margaret repeated the same phrase a dozen times. "No, I don't know what's happened. She just said she needs to tell us something important." What none of them knew was that Rose had spent the last 3 weeks planning this moment. A month ago, during a routine checkup, the doctor had delivered the news she'd been expecting for years. Her heart was failing. She had perhaps a few weeks, a few months at most. But Rose wasn't worried about dying. At 89, she had lived a full life, rich with love and purpose. What kept her awake on the hospital nights was the weight of the secret she'd carried for 3 decades. A secret that had silently shaped the life of each of her grandchildren. As the family began to gather in the hospital corridors, Rose mentally revisited the last 30 years of her life. She remembered each chilly pre-dawn hour when she'd left her home at 2 in the morning, walking the deserted streets, heading towards the central business district. She remembered the weight of cleaning equipment, the pungent odor of chemicals, the endless nights spent scrubbing offices while the city slept. But she also recalled every degree she'd seen handed out, every graduation ceremony she'd attended from the back of the auditorium, the smiles on her grandchildren's faces as they received their university acceptance letters. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every simple meal at home was worth it for those moments. The first to arrive was James, her eldest grandson, now a renowned surgeon from Melbourne. At 35, James had a brilliant career, a beautiful family, and a spectacular home. He never knew that his medical training had cost precisely 180,000 Australian dollars, every cent paid for by his grandmother's calloused hands. "Grandma, how are you feeling?" James asked, kissing Rose's forehead. "I'm all right, my dear. Just waiting for the others to arrive. We have a lot to talk about," Rose replied, stroking the face of the grandson she had cradled as a baby. One by one, the grandchildren arrived. Sarah, the civil engineer from Brisbane, who had graduated from the country's top university. Michael, the lawyer from Perth, who'd completed his master's in London. Emma, the art teacher from Adelaide, who'd studied in France. Thomas, the tech entrepreneur, who'd earned his MBA in the States. 12 grandchildren, 12 successful careers, 12 university degrees. And not one of them had ever questioned how they'd managed to study without incurring debt, how their middle-class families had afforded expensive universities, how they'd been so fortunate to secure scholarships so easily. When everyone had gathered in the small hospital room, Rose asked Margaret to fetch an old, dusty box that sat beneath her bed at home. It was a worn showbox, tied with old string, that had always been there but had never been questioned by anyone. "Before I open this box," Rose began, her voice frail but firm, "I want you to know that everything I've done out of love. Never feel guilty for what you're about to discover. Never feel indebted to me. A grandmother's love accrues no interest, carries no repayment deadline." Margaret returned with the box, her hands trembling slightly. The silence in the room was deafening. 12 successful adults stared at that simple box, as if it held the secrets of the universe. "You can open them," Rose whispered. Margaret slowly opened the showbox with trembling fingers. What she saw first was stacks and stacks of time-yellowed receipts, meticulously organized into small envelopes with handwritten names. Each envelope bore the name of a grandchild: James, medicine; Sarah, engineering; Michael, law. "Oh my goodness," Margaret murmured, pulling out one of the envelopes. "Mum, what is all this?" Rose took a deep breath, gathering strength for the revelation she had rehearsed thousands of times in her mind during the lonely pre-dawn hours of the past few years. "These are the receipts for all the university fees I've paid for the last 30 years, Rose said simply, as if commenting on the weather. The silence that followed was absolute. 12 pairs of eyes were fixed on their grandmother, slowly processing what they had just heard. James was the first to speak, his voice, trained by medical school to remain calm in crisis, failing him entirely. "Grandma, this isn't possible. I got a scholarship for medicine. The university told me I'd been selected for a special program." Rose smiled sadly. "There was no scholarship, my darling. I paid your fees directly to the university, always asking them to say it was a scholarship. I didn't want you to know your poor grandmother was paying for your education." Sarah, the engineer, picked up her envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of receipts from the University of Queensland, each stamped paid, each for $4,000 a month, for 5 years. $80,000, Sarah murmured, calculating mentally. "Grandma, where did you get $80,000? You always said you could barely make ends meet." "And that was true, dear. I could barely make ends meet because every spare penny went to you lot." Rose gestured to a file at the bottom of the box. "Margaret, can you get that red folder?" Margaret opened the folder and found employment contracts, all signed by Rose, all for night cleaning jobs. The first contract was dated 1995, the exact year James had started university. Night cleaning services contract, Rose Henderson. Hours: 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., Monday to Saturday. Wage: $15 per hour. Michael, the lawyer, quickly did the math. 5 hours a night, 6 nights a week, 52 weeks a year. "Grandma, that's only $23,000 a year. How did you manage to pay for all our universities?" Rose chuckled softly, a sound laced with pride and exhaustion. "Ah, my dear lawyer, always so good with numbers. But you've overlooked something rather significant." She gestured towards a second stack of contracts. "I wasn't working at just one place. I was working at 3 different offices every single night. From 2 to 4 in the morning at the downtown business complex, from 4:30 to 6 at the medical center, and from 6:30 to 7:30 at the government building." Emma, the art teacher, was quietly weeping. "Grandma, you were over 60 when I started university. How did you manage to work 15 hours a night?" "It wasn't 15 hours, darling. It was 5.5. But yes, it was grueling." Rose looked at each of her grandchildren. "Do you think I went out in the wee hours for fresh air? I worked while you slept, dreaming of your futures." Thomas, the tech entrepreneur, was poring over the receipts for his US MBA. $120,000, he stated, incredulous. "Grandma, that's nearly 200,000 Australian dollars back then. How did you scrape together that sum?" Rose sighed. "For your MBA, my love, I had to part with a few things. Margaret, do you recall the jewelry I inherited from my mother? The pieces I claimed were stolen." Margaret nodded, recalling how her mother had been devastated when she reported the alleged theft of the family heirlooms. "They weren't stolen. I sold them. Every ring, every necklace, every brooch that had been passed down through generations of our family. I sold it all to fund Thomas's MBA." The room was now filled with stifled sobs. Lucy, the youngest granddaughter who had graduated in veterinary science just 2 years prior, found her own envelope and discovered something that shocked her even more. "Grandma, this says you didn't just pay for my tuition, but also my flat for all 5 years. And there are receipts for groceries, clothes, even books." Rose nodded. "You were the youngest, dear. You were far from home, alone in a big city. I couldn't have you wanting for anything. So I not only paid for your education, but I ensured you had everything you needed." David, Rose's son and father of 4. Of the 2 grandchildren present, he finally found his voice. "Mum, how long did you do this for? When did you start working the early shifts?" Rose thought for a moment. "I started when James went to university in 1995. And I only stopped last year, when Lucy graduated. 30 years. David. 30 years cleaning offices in the pre-dawn hours to give my grandchildren what I never had, debt-free education." The ensuing silence was broken only by the hum of medical equipment and the stifled sobs of the family. Each person in the room was processing the magnitude of the sacrifice Rose had made, the unconditional love she had demonstrated without ever seeking recognition. Patrick, Rose's youngest son, looked at the receipts for his 3 children. "Mum, you worked the early shifts until you were 88 years old." 88 and a half, Rose corrected with a faint smile. "I only stopped when the doctor said my heart couldn't take it anymore. But you were all graduated by then, so my mission was complete." As the family absorbed the initial shock of the revelation, Rose asked Margaret to retrieve a second box from her bedroom cupboard. This one was even heavier, filled with personal diaries Rose had religiously kept throughout all those years. "I want you to fully understand what it meant to me to be able to provide this for you," Rose said, opening the first diary, dated 1995. "It wasn't just the early shifts. It was a conscious choice to live differently so you could have a better life." Margaret picked up the 1995 diary and began to read aloud. March 15, 1995. "James started medicine today. I'm so proud. Tuition is $3,800 a month. I've secured the cleaning job at the central office. I'll start tomorrow at 2 a.m. I need to buy proper shoes but only have $50 left. I'll use this month's rent money." March 25, 1995. "It's been 10 days of just bread and tea. I need to save every penny for James' tuition. When he calls, I pretend I've just had dinner. I don't want him to worry." James was openly weeping now. "Grandma, you starved yourself so I could study." Rose cupped her grandson's face. "It wasn't starvation, dear. It was just prioritization. I could eat less, but you couldn't. Study less." Sarah picked up another diary, from 2001, when she had started engineering. April 3, 2001. "Sarah got accepted into engineering in Brisbane. I now have 2 at university simultaneously. I'll need more work. I've taken on a second job cleaning the medical center from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. This means only 2 hours of sleep a night, but it'll be worth it." June 18, 2001. "My feet are swollen and aching badly. The doctor said I need proper shoes to be on my feet this long, but they cost $200. That money will pay for James's books this semester. I'll stick with the old shoes." Michael, the lawyer, was reading entries from 2003. September 12, 2003. "Michael wants to do law. This means 3 grandchildren at university at the same time. I've taken on a third job from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. I now work 5.5 hours every evening. I get home at 8 p.m., sleep until 1 p.m., and use the rest of the day for shopping and looking after the house." December 24, 2003. "Christmas today. The grandchildren asked why I didn't buy expensive gifts like the other grandmothers. I made up that I was saving for a trip I will never take. The truth is, every cent I have goes towards their educations. Seeing their happy faces when they talk about university is the best gift I can receive." Emma discovered a particularly touching entry from 2010. October 8, 2010. "Emma wants to study art in France for a year. The program costs $40,000. I've sold the engagement ring my late husband gave me. It was the only valuable thing I had left of his, but Emma needs this opportunity. I know he would understand." Emma broke down in tears. "Grandma, you sold your engagement ring for me. And I'd do it again without a second thought," Rose replied firmly. "Objects are just objects, darling. But your education, your dreams, that's forever." Thomas found the entries about his MBA. January 15, 2015. Thomas got accepted into his MBA at Harvard. "I'm beyond proud, but the cost is daunting. $120,000 American. I'll need to sell the family jewels. They are pieces from 4 generations, but Thomas represents the future of 5 generations." March 3, 2015. "I went to the jewelers today. The appraiser said the pieces were worth $180,000 Australian. I cried on the way home, not from sadness, but from gratitude for having something valuable enough to give Thomas that opportunity." Lucy, the youngest, discovered something that took her breath away in the most recent diaries. August 20, 2020. Lucy started veterinary school. "At 85, I can still work, thank God. But my body is slower. It takes me longer to clean the offices. Sometimes, the security guards find me still working at 8 a.m. They're kind and pretend not to see." February 14, 2023. "My heart is failing, but Lucy graduates in December. I just need to hold on for 10 more months. 10 months and my mission will be complete. All my grandchildren graduated, all debt-free, all free to fly high." David, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "Mum, why did you never tell us? We could have helped, we could have shared the costs." Rose shook her head vigorously. "And take away your chance to invest in your own families? David, when James was at university, you had 2 young children at home. Margaret was building her business. Patrick was newly married. You had your own responsibilities." "But that was our responsibility, Mum. They were our children," Margaret protested. "And they were my grandchildren," Rose replied simply. "I had already raised my children. You were adults, independent, successful, but my grandchildren needed an opportunity. And I had that opportunity to give." Patrick picked up one of the last diaries. "Mum, here you write about back pain, heart problems, exhaustion. Why did you keep working when you were ill?" "Because every day I didn't work was one less day my grandchildren had to realize their dreams," Rose explained. "Pain passes, dear, but regret for not giving you my best would last forever." James, as a doctor, was concerned about the health details he read in the diaries. "Grandma, you mention here that you fainted several times at work in recent years. Why did you never seek medical help?" Rose smiled sadly. "Because a doctor's appointment cost $200, and $200 was exactly what I needed for Lucy's books that semester. My health could wait, her education couldn't." The room was now filled with an atmosphere of reverence. Each person present was beginning to understand not only the financial magnitude of Rose's sacrifice, but the emotional and physical depth of what she had endured silently for 3 decades. Rose took a deep breath and asked Margaret to look for, at the bottom of the second box, sealed and yellowed envelope. It was thick, heavy, with Rose's shaky handwriting scrawled across the front, "To my 12 treasures, to be read only after I am gone." "Indeed," Rose said, clutching the envelope to her chest. "I had planned for you to read this only after I had departed. But the doctor has told me my time is short, and I realized I want to be here to see your reactions, to answer your questions, to hold you one last time after you know the full truth." With trembling hands, Rose opened the envelope and withdrew several sheets of handwritten paper. Her once firm and elegant script bore the marks of years and exhaustion, but each word had been penned with care and love. "I want James to read," Rose said, handing the sheets to her eldest grandson. "As a doctor, he has a steady voice that will help you process what you are about to hear." James took the sheets with reverence, cleared his throat, and began to read. "My 12 most precious treasures. If you are reading this letter, It means the time has come for you to know the full truth about the last 30 years of my life. I do not write these words in search of gratitude or recognition, but because you deserve to know how deeply you are loved and how incredibly proud I am of each and every one of you. When James was born in 1970, I held that tiny baby in my arms and made a silent promise. I vowed that no matter what happened, I would do everything in my power to ensure that all my grandchildren had opportunities that I never had. I was born in 1936, smack in the middle of the Depression. My family was poor, and I had to leave school at the age of 12 to work and help out at home. I always dreamt of studying, of having a profession, of being more than just another poor woman. When you began to grow and show interest in studying, in having careers, my heart swelled with hope. But it also swelled with determination. I knew your families were middle class, that there would be financial limitations. And I decided that those limitations would not be what stopped you from reaching for your stars. The first to test me was James. When he decided to pursue medicine, I knew it was one of the most expensive and longest careers. 5 years. University, then residence, specialization. It would have been a monumental investment. At the time, I was 65 and living on a modest pension. The maths was straightforward. My pension wouldn't cut it. That's when I discovered the night cleaning jobs. At first, I thought it would be temporary, just until James graduated. But then Sarah came along with engineering, then Michael with law. And I realized this wouldn't be temporary. This would be my new life. And you know what I discovered? That this new life gave me a purpose I'd never felt before. Every night, as I walked the deserted streets towards the offices, I wasn't just going to work. I was building your futures, brick by brick, cent by cent. Yes, it was physically grueling. At 70, cleaning 3 different offices every night wasn't easy. My feet ached, my back protested, and there were nights I could barely stand. But you know what kept me going? Picturing you at your graduations, proud, debt-free, ready to start your careers without the financial burden I'd carried my whole life. And yes, I made sacrifices you never knew about. There were months I ate nothing but bread and tea to save money for your tuition fees. There were winters I didn't turn on the heating to save on the electricity bill. I sold everything of value, the family jewels, antique furniture, even the engagement ring your grandfather gave me. But I want you to understand something crucial. I never felt like a victim. I never felt sacrificed or exploited. Every decision I made was done with joy in my heart, because I was investing in what mattered most to me, your futures. When James graduated from medical school, I wept with pride from the back of that auditorium. When Sarah became an engineer, when Michael passed his bar exam, when Emma exhibited her artwork for the first time, every one of your achievements was my achievement too. You fulfilled my own unfulfilled dreams. And I chose to keep it a secret for a very specific reason. I didn't want you to feel guilty or indebted to me. I wanted you to fly free, to make your choices based on your dreams, not on obligations to me. If you'd known I was sacrificing for you, you might have passed up significant opportunities, and that would have broken my heart. I would have preferred you saw me as the poor grandma who couldn't afford lavish gifts, rather than the grandma who was secretly funding your futures. I would have rather you believed in your own luck and merit, than feel dependent on me. Each of you has given me something different over these years. James, you've given me the pride of knowing your hands save lives every single day. Sarah, you've given me the satisfaction of knowing your constructions will stand for generations. Michael, you've given me the joy of knowing you stand for justice. Emma, you've given me the beauty of knowing your arts touch hearts. James paused, his voice thick with emotion. The room was utterly silent, save for the stifled sobs of the family. Continue, dear, Rose murmured. They need to hear it all. James wiped his eyes and continued reading from Rose's letter. Thomas, you've given me the thrill of knowing your innovations change the world. Lucy, you've given me the tenderness of knowing you heal and protect the animals we cherish so dearly. And so on. Each of you has enriched my life in a unique and special way. But there's something else I need to confess, and this part is the hardest to write. There were times, especially in these last few years, when my body just wanted to give up. There were dawns when I'd wake up and feel I couldn't possibly get out of bed, let alone work for 5 hours cleaning offices. I particularly recall one night in 2019. I was 83 years old, and it was one of the coldest nights of winter. It was pouring with rain, and I had a severe flu. My whole body ached, I coughed incessantly, and I had a fever. Anyone sensible would have stayed home, in bed, taking care of themselves. But that week, Thomas needed to pay the final installment for his MBA. It was the last payment. After that, he would officially graduate. And I knew if I didn't work that night, I wouldn't have the money in time. So, I got up, put on my damp work clothes from the previous night, I couldn't afford a second uniform, and headed out into the rain. I remember collapsing on the stairs of the second office. The night security guard found me and wanted to call an ambulance. "Please, no," I pleaded with him. "Just let me rest for 5 minutes and I can continue." Because I knew an ambulance would cost money I didn't have, and more importantly, would prevent me from finishing that night's work. The security guard, a kind young man named Kevin, helped me finish cleaning that floor. I never learned his last name, but his kindness that night gave me the strength to carry on. You might think this was extreme, that it was the foolishness of a stubborn old woman. But I want you to understand, at that moment, passed out on that cold stairwell, the only thing I could think of was the smile on Thomas's face when he received his MBA. That's what I thought of as I forced my weary body to keep going. And when Thomas called me 2 weeks later, ecstatic, saying, "Grandma, I graduated. I did it. Now I can start my own company." Every second of pain, every drop of sweat, every tear of exhaustion was worth it. This happened with each one of you, in different ways. When Lucy was in her final year of veterinary school, I was already 88. My heart was failing, I'd known for months, but I pretended it was just age troubles. Because Lucy was the youngest, the last, and I had to see her through. There were nights I had to stop midway through cleaning because I couldn't breathe properly. I'd sit on the floor of those empty offices in the dark, waiting for my heart to settle. And do you know what I thought of during those moments? I thought of each of you, of your accomplishments, of how you were building beautiful, successful lives. I thought of James saving lives in the hospital, of Sarah designing bridges that connect communities, of Michael fighting for people who need justice. And it gave me the strength to get up and keep cleaning. I want you to know that I never, not for 1 second, regretted those choices. But I also want you to understand that I didn't do it expecting anything in return. I didn't do it so you'd feel obligated to care for me in my old age, or so you'd visit me more, or so you'd feel indebted to me. I did it because that's what love does. True, unconditional love doesn't calculate costs or benefits. It simply acts, protects, provides, sacrifices when necessary. And you, my 12 treasures, are the greatest love of my life. There's one last confession I need to make, and this one might be the hardest for you to hear. Through all those 4 years, while working late nights, I maintained a small ritual that gave me strength. Before leaving home each night, I'd pass through the living room where I keep your photos. There was a picture of each of you on the wall, photos from childhood, adolescence, graduations. And I'd stop in front of each one and say a little prayer. God, give me strength to work one more night for James. He will save many lives. God, help me clean these offices for Sarah. She will build important things. And so on, for each of you. In recent years, when my body was weaker, I would sometimes cry looking at these photos. I didn't cry from sadness or self-pity, but from an emotion so intense it had no name. It was pride, love, hope, and gratitude, all mingled into something overwhelming. Because you gave me the greatest gift a grandmother can receive, the privilege of contributing to your successes. You allowed me to be part of something bigger than myself, of a legacy that extends far beyond my simple life. When I die, and I know it will be soon, I want you to know that I will die the richest woman in the world. Not in money, obviously. I spent all the money I had and a bit more for you. But rich in love, rich in purpose, rich in accomplishments that I will carry with me wherever I go next. And I want you to know one last thing. You owe me nothing. You don't owe me eternal gratitude. You don't owe me constant visits. You don't owe me any kind of compensation. What you owe me is to continue being exceptional, to continue making a difference in the world, to continue being the wonderful people you have become. If you want to honor me by being wonderful parents to your own children. If you want to thank me by using your talents to make the world a better place. If you want to repay me by passing on the same generosity you received. James's voice completely broke at this point. He couldn't continue reading through the tears he couldn't stop shedding. Sarah took the papers from him and continued, her own voice trembling. And if one day you have your own grandchildren, tell them about great-grandmother Rose who loved them even before they were born. Tell them that love has no limits when it's about family, that no sacrifice is too great when it comes to giving opportunities to those we love. My life has been a simple one, without great achievements visible to the world. But it was a life full of love and purpose. And you, my 12 treasures, are my masterpiece, my legacy, my contribution to a better world. With all the love a heart can hold. Grandma Rose. The silence that followed after Sarah finished reading the letter was unlike any silence that family had ever experienced. It was a silence charged with emotions so profound that words seemed inadequate, insufficient to express what each person was feeling. James was the first to move. He rose from his chair, walked to Rose's bed, and knelt beside her, holding her frail hands between his. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice, usually that of an experienced doctor, reduced to the vulnerable murmur of a grandson. "I didn't know. How could I not have known?" Rose stroked James's face, the same maternal gesture she had made since he was a baby. "Because I didn't want you to know, my love. I wanted you to focus on your studies, on becoming the extraordinary doctor you have become. But Grandma, if I had known, I could have gotten a job, I could have helped pay. And risk your grades. Risk your concentration on your studies." Rose shook her head firmly. "Never. Medicine demands total dedication. There was no room for financial worries in your mind." Sarah approached, still clutching the letter. "Grandma, all these years I complained that you didn't buy us expensive Christmas presents. My goodness, I was so ungrateful. You were a child, then a young adult doing what children and young adults do," Rose replied gently. "And you know what I thought when you complained about the simple gifts? I thought, if you only knew that your real present is not having student debt, you'd be happier with these little tokens." Michael, ever the analytical lawyer, was trying to process the legal and financial magnitude of what had transpired. "Grandma, exactly how much did you spend all these years?" Rose smiled. "Michael, my dear lawyer, always asking the important questions. Margaret, can you get the blue folder from the bottom of the box? All my calculations are in there." Margaret found the folder and opened it, revealing meticulously organized, handwritten spreadsheets detailing every educational expense over the last 30 years. "Let me see," Rose said, putting on her reading glasses. "James, medicine, $190,000. Sarah, engineering, $95,000. Michael, law plus a master's in London, $160,000. Emma, arts plus a year in France, $85,000. Thomas, MBA at Harvard, $200,000. She continued reading out the figures for each of her 12 grandchildren. When she finished, she did the final tally. Total, $1.4 million Australian dollars over 30 years. The number echoed through the room like thunder. Emma, who had always been the most emotional of the family, completely broke down. $1,400,000, she repeated, disbelieving. "Grandma, you spent $1,400,000 on us." "Invested," Rose corrected. "I didn't spend. I invested. And it was the best investment of my life." Lucy, the youngest, was calculating mentally. "Grandma, working night shifts, How much did you earn per year? In the early years, about $25,000 a year. In the later years, with 3 jobs, it reached $45,000 annually. Patrick, who had remained silent processing everything, finally spoke. Mum, that means you literally spent every penny you earned over the last 30 years on us. How did you live? How did you pay your own bills? Rose sighed. Well, I received a small government pension, about $800 a month. That covered basic rent, simple food, essential utilities. Everything else went to you lot. David was doing his own calculations. Mum, $800 a month for all your personal expenses? That's impossible to live on with any dignity. I lived, Rose said simply. Perhaps not lavishly, but I lived. And more importantly, you prospered. Thomas, the businessman, was visibly disturbed. Grandma, my MBA cost $200,000. How much of your work did that represent? Rose thought for a moment. Well, at the time I was earning about $40,000 a year. So that was 5 full years of work just for your MBA, dear. 5 years, Thomas repeated, stunned. 5 years of your life working night shifts just for me. And I would have done 10 if necessary, Rose replied without hesitation. Emma was still processing the revelation about the family jewelry. Grandma, you said you sold the jewelry that was family inheritance. How many generations did those jewels represent? 4 generations, Rose replied. My great-grandmother brought those jewels from Ireland in 1890. They passed to my grandmother, then to my mother, then to me. And now, well, now they've become your education. Margaret was crying silently. Mum, you broke a 4-generation tradition by us. I didn't break it, I transformed it, Rose corrected. The jewelry was beautiful, but it was merely objects. Your education is a treasure that no one can steal, that will last forever, that can be passed down to your own children. Lucy was examining the most recent journals. Grandma, here you write about chest pains, shortness of breath, fainting spells. How long did you work while unwell? The last 5 years were the most difficult, Rose admitted. My heart was failing, but you were still studying. I couldn't stop. James, being a doctor, was alarmed. Grandma, you could have died, working with serious heart conditions, especially physical labor. I knew the risks, Rose said calmly. But I also knew that if I stopped working, Lucy couldn't finish veterinary. And she was the last. I had to see it through. The room was now filled with a growing understanding not only of Rose's love but of the fierce, almost superhuman determination she had displayed over 3 decades. Sarah murmured, Grandma, you literally risked your life for our education. And you risked your lives to become who you are today, Rose replied. You worked hard, studied tirelessly, made sacrifices of your own. I just cleared an obstacle from your path. The full weight of the revelation was finally sinking in. It wasn't just about the money, though $1.4 million was an astronomical sum. It was about unconditional love translated into daily action over 3 decades. It was about one woman who had completely redefined her own life to maximize opportunities for her grandchildren. Margaret picked up one of the last folders from the box and found something that moved her even further. Letters from every university, thanking the generous anonymous donor for regular contributions. There were dozens of them, from institutions across Australia and even international ones. Mum, Margaret said, showing her the letters. The universities wrote to you. Rose nodded. Some figured out there was a consistent donor behind several scholarships. They wanted to honor me publicly, but I always asked to remain anonymous. James picked up one of the letters from the University of Sydney. Dear Mrs. Henderson, thanks to your anonymous generosity over the years, we have been able to provide quality education to numerous talented students. Your contribution has transformed not just individual lives, but entire families. They didn't know all the students were from the same family, Rose chuckled softly. Thomas discovered something even more astonishing: certificates of recognition from various charities. Grandma, you donated to orphanages too? Ah, that. Rose seemed a tad embarrassed. Well, sometimes there was a little bit of money left over at the end of the month. And I'd think of the children who didn't even have grandmothers or parents to help them with their schooling. Lucy was reading one of the certificates. Ms. Rose Henderson, recognized for 15 years of consistent donations to the Sydney Orphans Education Fund. Your contributions have enabled 47 children to attend university. 47 children, Sarah repeated, dumbfounded. Grandma, besides us 12, you helped another 47 kids. Rose shrugged. They were only small amounts, $50 or $100 a month, when it was left over. Michael, ever the analyst, was doing some sums. $50 a month for 15 years. Grandma, that's over $9,000 you donated on top of what you spent on us. Invested, Rose corrected again. And those were children who had no one. You had family, you had love. They only had hope. Emma found photos in the folder, graduation photos of unknown young men and women, all inscribed, "To Mrs. Rose, who made this possible." There were dozens of them. Grandma, are these the orphanage kids? Some of them. They used to send photos of their graduations. I kept them all. Rose smiled through tears. You know what I found? That it doesn't matter if they are your biological grandchildren or children you've never met personally. When you invest in a child's education, when you give them a chance, your heart swells with the same pride. David was visibly moved. Mum, you haven't just created a legacy for our family. You've created a legacy for dozens of other families too. And there's one more thing, Rose said, asking Margaret to fetch the last folder. This contains something you all need to know about the future. Margaret opened the folder, revealing legal documents, a will, government bond certificates, and bank statements. Grandma, what is this? Rose took a deep breath. Well, you all think I spent all my money on education. And it's true, I spent all my wages from the cleaning jobs. But there's something I haven't told you. James picked up the bank documents. Grandma, this shows an account with $230,000. All these years working through the early hours, I never touched my government pension. Not a single cent. I deposited it all into a savings account. 30 years of $800 monthly, with compound interest. Patrick was crunching the numbers. $230,000. Mum, you could have lived a more comfortable life all these years with that money. And spend the money that belonged to my great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. Rose shook her head. Never. Thomas was reading the will. Grandma, you want to split this amongst us? Not with me, Rose said firmly. This is for the great-grandchildren yet to come. Your children, your children's children. I want you to establish a family education fund, so that no child in this family ever has to forego their studies due to lack of funds. Sarah was crying again. Grandma, even after you're gone, you still want to look after future generations. Love doesn't die, dear. It multiplies. It expands. It perpetuates. This money is my way of continuing to look after you even when I'm no longer here. Lucy found a special clause in the will. Grandma, it says here that a portion of the money should go to the orphanage where you used to donate. $50,000 for them. For them to continue helping children without families. It's my way of thanking them for showing me that love can extend beyond blood. Michael, being a lawyer, was reviewing all the documents. Grandma, this is all meticulously planned. There are provisions for education, for family medical emergencies, for charity. Did you spend years planning this? Decades, Rose confirmed. Every night, after work, I'd come home and spend an hour organizing documents, doing calculations, planning your futures. Because I knew that one day I wouldn't be here to personally look after you. Emma was reading a specific section of the will. Grandma, Here you're establishing annual scholarships in each of our names. 4 underprivileged children. 1 scholarship in each grandchild's name, for $5,000 annually, in perpetuity. Your names will help other children have the same opportunities you've had. James was processing the full magnitude of Rose's legacy. Grandma, you didn't just provide us with an education. You've created a perpetual system of education for others. And there's one last surprise, Rose said, smiling through her exhaustion. Margaret, in the green folder, there's a letter from the Australian government. Margaret found the official letter and began to read. Ms. Rose Henderson, it is with immense pleasure that we inform you that, due to your extraordinary contributions to education over 3 decades, you have been selected to receive the Order of Australia on the upcoming Australia Day. The room erupted in exclamations of surprise and pride. The Order of Australia? David asked, incredulous. Mum, that's one of the highest honours the country can bestow. They found out about my work through the universities and the orphanage, Rose explained. Apparently, transforming the lives of almost 60 young people through education is considered exceptional service to the community. Thomas was beaming. Grandma, you're getting the Order of Australia. That means the entire nation will recognise what you've done. Rose smiled faintly. In truth, dear, I won't be there to receive it. The ceremony is in January, and the doctor said I only have a few weeks left. But you can go in my stead. The weight of this reality crashed down on the family like an avalanche. Everyone knew Rose was ill, but somehow, caught up in the revelation of her heroic sacrifice, they had momentarily forgotten they were saying goodbye. James, being a doctor, knew he had to ask, Grandma, how long have you known about how much time you have? 3 months, Rose answered honestly. The doctor was clear. My heart is too weak. I've worked beyond my limits for too long. Sarah clutched Rose's hand. Grandma, are you in pain? A little, but nothing compared to the pain I would feel if I had passed without telling you all this. I needed you to know. I needed you to understand how much you are loved. Lucy, ever the most sensitive, asked through tears, Grandma, are you scared? Rose thought for a moment. Scared? No. Darling, how can I be scared when I know I'm leaving behind 12 extraordinary people who will continue to make a difference? How can I be scared when I know my love for you will live on in every life you save, every project you build, every person you help? Margaret found something in the final folder that made her cry even harder. Letters penned by Rose for each grandchild, to be opened at specific moments in their lives. Mum, what are these letters? They're messages for you to open in the future. One for when each of you gets married, another for when you have your first children, another for when you retire. Rose explained. I want to be present for your important moments, even when I'm no longer physically here. Emma picked up her letter marked for Emma, on your wedding day, and held her close to her chest. Grandma, you've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had 30 years to plan, darling. 30 years of early mornings planning your futures. David, who had been processing everything in silence, finally spoke. Mum, how can we ever repay what you've done? Rose looked at him firmly. David, you already have. Every day James saves a life, that's my repayment. Every bridge Sarah builds, that's my repayment. Every person Michael champions in court, that's my repayment. You repay by being who you are. Patrick asked. And what do we do now, Mum? How do we move forward knowing all of this? You move forward by doing exactly what you were already doing, being extraordinary. But now you do it knowing that you carry with you the love of a grandmother who loved you beyond measure. Thomas had been quiet, clearly processing something profound. Grandma, I want to set up a foundation in your name. I want your story to inspire others to invest in education. If you do that, dear, make sure it's not about me. Make it about the power of education, about how one person can change the world by investing in the potential of others. Michael, ever the pragmatist, asked, "Grandma, is there anything else we need to know? Any other secrets?" Rose chuckled softly. "Just one last one, and this one's small. Remember how I always said I didn't like sweets, that I preferred plain food?" They all nodded. "I loved sweets. Chocolate was my weakness. But chocolate cost money that could go towards your tuition fees. So I convinced myself I didn't like it." Emma laughed through her tears. "Grandma, you denied yourself even chocolate for us. And many other small things. But you know what? I found the sweetest chocolate in the world is watching you achieve your dreams." James stood up and hugged Rose. "Grandma, I love you more than words can express." One by one, each grandchild embraced Rose, whispering words of love and gratitude. It was a moment of farewell, but also of celebration. A celebration of a life lived with extraordinary purpose. Rose looked at them all gathered around her. "I want you to make me a promise." "Anything, Grandma," Sarah replied. "Promise me you will tell this story to your children. Not to glorify me, but to show them that true love is action, not just words. That one determined person can change the course of many lives." "We promise," they all said in unison. "And promise that if you ever see a child, any child, who needs an educational opportunity, you'll remember this grandma who cleaned offices in the early hours and do your part to help. We promise." Rose closed her eyes, a look of utter peace on her face. "Then I can depart in peace. Because I know my legacy isn't just you 12. It's all the lives you will touch, all the children you will help, all the kindness you will spread throughout the world." 3 days later, Rose quietly passed away in the early hours, the same time she used to wake up to work for them. Her last breath was drawn with a smile on her face, as if preparing for another night of working for love. The funeral was extraordinary. In addition to family, hundreds attended. Former colleagues from the offices she cleaned, staff from the universities that discovered her story, young people from the orphanage she had helped, and even Kevin, the security guard who had helped her on that cold night years before. On the headstone, they engraved the words she had requested: "Rose Henderson, invested in what truly matters. Her multiplied love lives on forever." 6 months later, the Rose Henderson Educational Foundation was established by the 12 grandchildren. In its first year, it had already helped 50 underprivileged children gain entry to university. In the inaugural address, James said, "Our grandmother taught us that true love is not measured in words, but in actions. That an ordinary person can create an extraordinary legacy. And that investing in a child's education is investing in the future of all humanity." Rose's story spread throughout Australia and then across the globe. It became a documentary, a book, and inspired thousands of others to invest in the education of children in need. But perhaps the greatest tribute came 2 years later, when Lucy, the youngest granddaughter, gave birth to a baby girl. When asked her name, she smiled through tears of joy. "Rose. Her name is Rose. And when she grows up, I will tell her about the great-grandmother who loved her before she was even born, who worked in the early hours for 30 years so our family could fly high." And so, Rose's love continued, passed down from generation to generation. In generation, multiplying infinitely, precisely as she had envisioned during all those solitary dawns in the Sydney offices. Because true love never dies. It simply finds new avenues to flourish, to inspire, to transform the world. One life at a time, one educational opportunity at a time, one generation at a time. If this video resonated with you in any way, please like and share it with your friends and family. We'll see you in the next video. Until then.